It had never been a matter of ignorance. No, I knew. I knew long before the clues became too blatant to ignore. There was an understanding between us, a mutual silence that hung thick in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. He never admitted it, and I never asked. I didn't need to. The evidence was there, always. The late nights, the lingering glances at his phone, the moments when he would retreat into himself, only to return with that same tired smile, as if nothing had changed. Sometimes, I would see it in the way he would glance at me, like he was trying to gauge whether I knew, whether I cared. But I didn't need to ask. I already knew. I had accepted it long ago, almost as if it were a quiet agreement. I would remain silent, and so would he. In our house, the truth was something we both chose to avoid, because facing it might have meant facing the reality of what we had become. We had built our life on routines, small, comfortable rituals that kept us together without really connecting. The morning coffees, the quiet evenings watching TV, the shared silence. It was easy, effortless, almost like we were pretending we hadn't noticed the slow erosion of the love we once had. He still came home, still shared meals with me, and I suppose I did the same. We didn't argue. We didn't fight. We simply existed side by side, like two people who had forgotten how to truly be with each other. I don't remember when it stopped hurting. At first, it was like a dull ache, something that made my chest tighten with each passing day. But then, over time, I grew numb to it. His infidelities became background noise, a constant hum that I had learned to ignore. There was comfort in that, too. I had accepted my role in this silent agreement. He did what he needed to do, and I did what I needed to do. Neither of us questioned the other, neither of us dared to ask the things we both knew. And so, we lived in this strange, suspended reality, where nothing was ever said, but everything was understood. I used to wonder if this was how it was meant to be. How many marriages exist in this quiet state of understanding? How many lives are lived under the weight of secrets that never see the light of day? In a way, it felt safer this way. I didn't have to confront the truth. I didn't have to face the unbearable reality of betrayal. I simply accepted it, and in return, I got the comfort of knowing that we would continue living this way, forever in this quiet, knowing limbo. He knew I knew. And I knew he knew that I knew. There was a strange peace in this silence, a peace that had little to do with love and everything to do with avoidance. We both understood the unspoken rule: as long as we didn't ask, we didn't have to face the truth. But beneath that peace, something stirred. A part of me that refused to continue pretending. I could feel it deep inside, gnawing at the edges of the numbness I had built around myself. And yet, I didn't act on it. Not yet. As the years passed, the space between us grew wider, though we never truly spoke of it. There wasn't an argument, no loud confrontation, no moments of passionate rage. It was the quiet kind of distance, the kind that settles in slowly and steadily, until one day, you realize that you've become strangers. The house, once filled with laughter, was now a place where we merely passed through each other. I would stand in the kitchen preparing dinner, and he would sit in the living room, lost in his thoughts, as if we were both just going through the motions. We no longer shared those small, intimate conversations that once meant so much to us. The dreams we used to talk about, the future we had planned together, none of that seemed to matter anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't resentful. I didn't feel much of anything. I had long stopped expecting things from him, stopped hoping that he would suddenly change, that he would become the man I once loved, the man who had cared enough to want to build a life with me. Instead, I had settled into this strange calm, a numbness that came with acceptance. The betrayal wasn't new anymore. It was like background noise, something I had grown used to. I didn't fight it. I didn't challenge it. I simply lived with it. And he, too, had grown distant. His eyes no longer held that spark when he looked at me. The affection he once showed had turned into a mere formality. He no longer sought out my touch, no longer made those small gestures that once made me feel loved. There were no more late-night talks, no more playful teasing, no more of those little moments that reminded me of the man he used to be. I didn't even feel hurt by it. I was too far gone, too numb from the years of silently enduring this slow unraveling. We didn't fight because there was nothing left to fight for. We didn't argue because there were no more emotions left to express. We were like two ghosts, walking the same halls, occupying the same spaces, but never truly connecting. Our marriage had become a hollow shell of what it once was. I started to wonder how long we could go on like this. How long could we live in this quiet limbo, where everything was understood, but nothing was said? Was this how it was meant to be? Two people, once so full of love, now reduced to mere roommates who shared a bed but no longer shared anything of substance. Sometimes, I would lie awake at night, listening to the rhythm of his breathing beside me, and wonder when it had all stopped mattering. When had we given up on each other? When had we both resigned ourselves to this? He had stopped caring long before I did, or so it seemed. But I didn't have the courage to confront him. I didn't have the strength to bring it all into the light. So, I buried it inside me, along with all the other things I pretended didn't matter. But even as I continued down this path, a part of me was waking up. Something inside me was stirring, something I had ignored for so long. I had accepted the way things were, but the ache inside me had begun to grow. It was subtle at first, a fleeting thought, a fleeting feeling that passed before I could grasp it. But with each passing day, it grew stronger. I was waking up to the truth that I didn't want to just exist anymore. I didn't want to live a life where I accepted betrayal and numbness as my reality. I didn't want to be a passive participant in my own life anymore. There was a part of me that wanted more. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew it was there. He had his secrets. He had his betrayals. But I was tired of playing by the rules. I had grown weary of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. And I began to wonder, why should I? I hadn't anticipated it, this stirring inside me. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It wasn't an outburst of anger or betrayal. It was quieter than that, more subtle. It was like waking up from a long, deep sleep, realizing that something had shifted within me. That maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to accept this hollow, empty life any longer. It happened one morning, after he left for work. The house was still and silent, as it always was, and for a moment, I stood there, staring at the empty space he had left behind. His things were scattered around, his shoes by the door, his coat hung up in the hallway, his keys left on the counter. I glanced at the kitchen where I had spent years preparing meals for us, going through the motions, feeling like the wife in a picture frame, just a role I had to play. And that's when I saw it, his phone, left carelessly on the counter. The screen was unlocked, as it always was, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I wondered why it didn't bother me anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I had seen it all before, the texts, the calls, the reminders of his other life. But this time, instead of turning away, I picked up the phone. I didn't need to read anything to know what it would say. His lies were etched into my memory. I knew them by heart, the late-night calls, the secretive conversations, the flirty messages that didn't belong in our life. I had seen enough to know exactly what was going on. And yet, there was no feeling inside me, no overwhelming rush of betrayal. No gut-wrenching agony. Just a deep, quiet resignation that I had learned to live with. But something else was there, too. Something that had been buried beneath the surface for so long, something I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. A quiet voice whispered inside me, if he can do this, why can't I? It was a thought so foreign that it took me by surprise. I set the phone back down, my fingers lingering on its surface for a moment longer than necessary. The thought didn't linger in my mind like anger or vengeance. It wasn't about payback. It wasn't about hurting him. It was something else. Something deeper. Something that had been eating at me for years but had never been given the space to breathe. Why couldn't I have a life outside of this? Why couldn't I live outside the expectations of this marriage that had long stopped being real? Why should I keep pretending that I was fine, that I could keep accepting what he gave me when it wasn't enough anymore? I looked out the window, watching the world go by outside. It was a strange feeling, standing there in the quiet, knowing that things were about to change. I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't even sure what I was feeling, but it was real. It was something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. A need for something more. Something just for me. If he could live his double life, why couldn't I? And this time, I wouldn't hide it. I wouldn't pretend that I didn't know what was happening. I wouldn't silence the part of me that had been buried for so long. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to shout or cry or make demands. I wasn't going to let the anger take over. This was about something different. It was about me finally taking control of my own life. The decision wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making him feel the pain I had endured for so long. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost in the quiet surrender of our marriage. It was about acknowledging my own desires, my own needs, and not apologizing for them. I wasn't sure when I would do it, or with whom. I wasn't sure what it would look like. But I knew that from that moment on, I wasn't going to live in this quiet, unspoken agreement anymore. I wasn't going to stay trapped in this silent partnership that had long since ceased to exist. And I wouldn't hide it. I wouldn't live in shame. I had spent so many years pretending that everything was fine, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Every time I caught a glimpse of my husband's phone, every time I noticed his lingering glances when he thought I wasn't paying attention, I was reminded that we were no longer the people we used to be. Our marriage wasn't based on love anymore. It had become a routine, an arrangement, a performance. For the first time in years, I thought about what I wanted, what I truly wanted, beyond the confines of this marriage. I realized that I had given up so much of myself just to keep things normal. I had sacrificed pieces of my identity to play the role of the loyal wife, the one who quietly accepted her husband's faults, his betrayals, his emotional distance. I had told myself that it was enough, that keeping the peace was enough. But now, in the quiet of my own mind, I knew it wasn't. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had been asleep for too long. A woman who had given everything, but had received nothing in return. And I couldn't remember the last time I felt truly alive. I had buried my desires, my own needs, under layers of resignation and acceptance. But no more. It was time to wake up. The decision didn't come with a sense of triumph. There was no moment of clarity, no rush of emotion. It was a slow, inevitable realization, like the gradual unfolding of a flower. It felt like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long, the air filling your lungs, but without the panic. Just calm, steady, and sure. I wasn't angry with him. I wasn't out for revenge. I didn't need him to feel the pain I had felt, to acknowledge the wounds he had caused. I had learned that trying to make someone feel your pain was futile. No one can truly understand your suffering unless they choose to, and he had chosen not to understand me a long time ago. I had accepted that. But now, I was choosing something different. I was choosing me. It wasn't about getting back at him. It wasn't about hurting him the way he had hurt me. It was about living my life for me. If he could have his secrets, his pleasures outside of our marriage, then I could have mine. I had spent too long trying to keep a marriage alive that had been dead for years. It was time to live honestly with myself. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how this new path would unfold, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I had to stop living in this quiet, muted world where everything was understood but nothing was ever said. I had to step into the light, even if it meant stepping outside the boundaries of what I had once considered my life. I would no longer be the quiet, patient wife who accepted everything. I wouldn't hide behind the lies, pretending that everything was okay. I would take control of my own desires, my own needs. If he could live a life without shame, then so could I. I didn't know when it would happen or who it would be with. But I knew one thing: I wouldn't hide it. I wouldn't hide the fact that I wanted more. More than this. More than him. And I wouldn't be ashamed of it. Reading this story left me with such a deep and complex mix of emotions. The wife's journey from silence and resignation to reclaiming her own desires is incredibly powerful and, honestly, heartbreaking in its own way. Her internal transformation, from a woman who quietly accepts her husband's infidelities to someone who finally decides to live for herself, is both a moment of liberation and a painful admission of how long she's been living in denial. What struck me most is the emotional numbness that took over her life. For so many years, she silently endured betrayal, choosing not to confront her husband, not to challenge the status quo. The weight of her acceptance, of going along with the quiet, unspoken pact, is almost suffocating. But when she finally chooses to live for herself, to take control of her desires, it feels like she's shedding an old skin. The silence she's been living in, the quiet suffering, is broken, and that's both empowering and daunting. There's a certain sadness to her decision, too. In her liberation, she's no longer able to look at her marriage as a source of connection or fulfillment. There's no turning back, no moment of reconciliation, no reclaiming of what was lost. She's fully aware that stepping outside the boundaries of their marriage may never lead her back to a place of love or healing with her husband. But at the same time, I feel a sense of respect for her decision. She's no longer willing to live in someone else's shadow or behind a facade. I understand the desire to break free. Sometimes, when we are trapped in unhealthy, stagnant relationships, the only way out is to stop pretending everything is fine. It's a difficult and often painful realization that something needs to change. But I also feel deeply for the pain this causes, the inevitable unraveling of a marriage, the toll it takes on both partners. There's no perfect answer, no simple fix, only the realization that we must choose our own path, even if it's the harder one. My advice to anyone reading this story is to recognize when you are no longer living for yourself. If you find yourself in a situation where you are quietly enduring, ignoring the truth for the sake of comfort, or living in a false sense of peace, it's important to take a step back and ask, is this really the life I want? Don't ignore the signs of emotional neglect, don't let resentment build silently, and don't let fear of confrontation hold you back from seeking the truth. Your happiness, your peace, and your desires matter too. At the same time, remember that relationships are complex. While it's important to choose yourself and set boundaries, always be mindful of the impact of your choices, both on your life and the lives of those around you. Don't make decisions in haste or out of a desire to hurt others. Instead, take the time to really understand what you want and need, and try to make choices that reflect your worth and your growth, not just the wounds you carry. Lastly, if you find yourself in a situation where you're losing yourself or your happiness, it might be time to have an honest conversation, either with your partner or with someone you trust. Sometimes, the first step to reclaiming yourself is simply acknowledging your feelings and voicing them. Only when you face the truth can you start to heal, whether within the relationship or on your own. This story is a reminder that, no matter how deeply we may get caught in a relationship or a situation, we can always choose to step outside of it, if we're brave enough to confront our fears and our pain.